Hello, and welcome to Coffee by the Fireside with me, historian Diana Martinez. And this is about the history of people of color. Many times our history has been dismissed, ignored, and silenced, and excluded. And so, this is to again cover as much in different types of areas of people of color. Talk about people who have made positive contributions to our culture, to science, to art, to intellectual history, and also to discuss events that are very painful. And we need to look at those hard to look at painful events in history. We need to see what we have to learn and how to move forward and not to repeat the same thing over again and again. And so for our inaugural video here, okay, we're going to cover Ida B. Wells. And Ida B. Wells as a role model of an activist and a hero. Okay, and so number one, she stood up for herself. Okay, long before we had Rosa Parks challenging segregation on the buses, we had Ida B. Wells. In 1884, she challenged segregation on the train. And because she challenged the segregation on the train, she was thrown off. Okay, and she is not going to take it. She's like, I was thrown off, but she didn't let it stop at that. She sued and she won her court case in 1885 at the state level. However, at the national level, her court case was not successful. Okay, but she still did it, and she still said, I'm going to fight for my rights." Ada B. Wells began her journey into journalism by writing about her experience of being kicked off the train. So she used that pain and that experience, and she had to talk about it. She couldn't just stay silent. And she submitted this article to a newsletter to a black church called the Living Way. Now, she didn't just stop there. Even aside from her teaching, she taught full time. And aside from that, she still made time to write articles, not just for the Living Way, but she also submitted articles to the Evening Star. And eventually, she owned her own, or co-owned, excuse me, she co-owned and became an editor of her own black newspaper called the Free Speech and Headlight. So that's a champion. Number two, she used her voice to speak out. She lived in Memphis, Tennessee, where there was a lot of lynching, and she did investigative journalism to find out what were the conditions surrounding the lynching. Okay, and many of the rhetoric coming from white supremacists was that it was punishment for black men sexually harassing white women. And she said, well, I'm going to, try to, I'm going to prove that wrong. And she did. She went and she interviewed people connected to these lynchings and asked them what they knew. And she did her investigative journalism, and she found out that many of these lynchings had to do with punishment of African Americans who were trying to be more upward mobile in life. Who were finding success in life. Okay, and this was a punishment, or African American businesses that were competition, okay, with white businesses. And so she published a record of these lynchings and the causes and the conditions around these lynchings. And it is known, and she published it in 1892, and it is known as Southern Horrors. And one of the stories that she covered in here was a personal story, or a story she was personally connected to. 3 of her friends had been lynched. They were the owners of People's Grocery, and it was a successful Black-owned grocery, and it posed as competition to the white grocery on the other side of town. And so those white business owners came and harassed the Black business owners in their own business, inside their business. And they decided to, again, defend themselves, and they shot one of the white people that were coming into the grocery to harass them. And so the the 3 black men were arrested, who were defending themselves in their own store. They were arrested and put into jail. During the night, a mob came and took them out of jail, and they hung and burned. They lynched the 3 men, and so um, she wrote about the story and included it in her publication. And her publication was 1892. The next year, 1893, her printing press was burned down. Okay, and she happened to be out of town doing some investigation and some lecturing down out in New York. Um, she went on to a lecture tour throughout Europe and throughout the United States. And in 1895, she also published the Red Record. So even though she was threatened, she still spoke out anyway. Now, the Red Record is a continuation of her work that she began in Southern Horrors. She researched white newspapers for examples of violence and all different types of violence towards African Americans that were printed in these white newspapers. And this is what is known and reported. And so from her research, she uncovered 10,000 different examples of violence towards African Americans in between the years 1864, 1894. That is a lot, okay? And she gave it meaning by creating statistical analysis of the data, um, geographic information, and to the extent of what kind of violence it was. Okay, and at the end of her research, she concluded that African Americans were targeted for violence because white people feared African Americans gaining more political clout. Okay, and these were, not big, huge gains at this time, but things such as being able to vote and registering to vote, and that the lynchings and the violence was punishment for trying to self-actualize. And so, yes. And so, and this is contrary to what many of the white folk had said at that time, white supremacists had said at that time, that it was to punish black men for harassing white women, and she said, "Nope, that's not it at all. It's for trying to be able to gain some sort of social mobility. That's what we're being punished for." And so she showed them through hard work and research and brains. She organized with others for a greater cause. Okay, so she organized with people that shared similar goals, again, to expand democracy and equality. Okay, so here in 1896, she joined the National Association of Colored Women and also the National Association Advancement of Colored People. And the National Association of Colored Women was to address issues that were important to Black women, such as segregation, protecting their children. And so, yes, okay. And so issues that were particular to Black women, because the National Association for Advancement of Colored People wasn't specific for women, okay. Also, they're going to discuss issues such as suffrage, the right to vote, okay. They too wanted women's suffrage, and they too experienced discrimination, not just as Black people, but also as women, okay. And so in 1913, she was working with allies, white allies in the National American Women's Suffrage Association parade. Okay, and however, not all of them were quite allies. Okay, the organizers, or the head organizers for National American Women's Suffrage Association, they told her that the Black women had to march at the end of the parade, at the back, okay, and that the white woman would be in the front. And she refused to be segregated. And she waited on the sidelines with the people who were viewing the parade, and she jumped into the march, okay, in with the white women delegation, and she linked arms with them and insisted in being up in the front, okay. And so that is Ida B. Wells, and 3 ways in which, how to say, she was a leader, an activist, and an American hero. And how I never learned about this in school, I do not know. We have, how to say, she most definitely should be included in the list of American heroes for risking her own safety and insisting on telling the truth and standing up for democracy and equality.